like when I travel to other countries around the world and I see what's going on and ask them what's, kind of what's your competitive advantage, what works, what doesn't work, and this sort of thing. And then they ask me about BC, well, how does BC work? And we hear a lot of things and it doesn't make a lot of sense to us. And this could be 5 years ago or it could be 20 years ago. But, and to me, what it always boils down to is that, for operating in BC, the BC operators are under a curse of public land ownership. When you're growing and things are booming and there's surplus timber and the policies are, they kind of start to make sense about better utilization or, developing an area, that's all positive things. But when you start adding in more and more forest policies because it's the mandate of the government to get reelected, as you talked about, and they're catering now to an urban voter who probably never gets out in the small towns in BC or doesn't get out in the forest at all, but they want old growth protected, and so that's why this comes in. It's not about, and it's probably a good thing too. I mean, personally, I wouldn't mind preserving old growth, but not the way the government's doing it. They're just blanketing everything and not consulting except with environmentalists, and so you start getting this curse, I call it. I worked for many years. I criticized the government stumpage system. It was the formula, and the formula is it lags the market. The stumpage price lags the market by about what was up to 6 months, and I think it's closer to 4 months now. Which it didn't have to, but it got established that way. And what happens is, and I've had discussions with various people in government. And they said, well, yeah, so the stumpage system lags and the stumpage is too high when prices are low and it's too low when prices were high, but it averages out. And I would say, well, that's fine to a company who will then take downtime when prices are low and stumpage is high, but go tell that to a laid off sawmill worker or a logger and tell them it averages out. It doesn't average out. And so this is the government supposed to be managing, doing things right for its people, but it still has this lag effect, and it's tied to the softwood lumber agreement, and that's what they'll say. But it's not really something that works. Whereas nearby Alberta, neighbor across from us, it lags by 1 month. Simple. And why does government policy need to get so complicated? And it was all tied to some complicated issue, and they'll say the industry was involved, and they probably were, but nevertheless, it was just something that can't be changed now. And the public ownership nowadays with forest policies, overlaying that with declining timber supplies anyways, is a recipe for disaster. And when I was at a conference, one of the best quotes I think I've heard was at a conference I was at last January at the truck loggers meeting, and I was on a panel with Paul Quinn, analyst at RBC, now retired, but he came up with a line that BC is uninvestable, period.
Yeah.
He says, and you can look at all the other areas in North America for a new investor. I always talk about new investors. Existing investors have options, but for a new investor, you would look elsewhere. You would not look at BC.